right, so the lady told me the recording's in progress. Mikey G, the one and only Mike Graham from Second Melody. We are on episode 23. We are getting back at this hot and heavy. How are you doing today? First off,
great.
Mike is one of those guys. So before we get going on this, and I know I posted it on LinkedIn, and I've said this, you are definitively one of those guys where Mike and I have only known each other now for a few months, but it's one of those vibes you get when you sit down and talk with them that you're like, thank God I didn't know this dude when I was 20. Dead or gutter. One or the other.
I already told you I like to keep a low profile. I think you've blown up my social media spot now. I got like people reaching out. I don't know what to do,
Yeah, that's actually really funny because my wife will be the first one to be like, yeah, if you want to keep a low profile, don't hang out with that.
Yeah.
one of the best ones I think I ever posted, and this was like legit, like she got pissed at me. We took a trip up to New Hampshire last summer. I don't know if you checked out all my posts on Instagram. And we were staying. So we went to check out a camp up in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. We stayed in this small, it's one of the oldest lake towns in the country, Wolfboro, New Hampshire. So my son, who's 11, who has a penchant to eat too much and then hurl all over the place like an hour later, we sit down to this little, cool little cafe. They had blueberry muffins and, I don't know, these egg crepe things that were super heavy, covered in butter. And we're like, Luca, don't eat all that. We're going to be traveling in the car on the way home. Don't eat all that. Wouldn't you know it? We get down to the Mass Pike and he's like, you just see him turn green, hurls all over the side of the Suburban. And I literally public shamed him. I'm like, we got out. The puke was covering the side of the Suburban. And I'm like, stand next to that and point to it. We told you not to do this. And that's what you did. And I posted it. My wife's like, are you kidding me?
That's when you show at his wedding, right? In the montage.
Yeah. We had so many so many awesome comments. And then my brother-in-law was like, dude, TMI. And it was just covered. When I say the sheer horror, as he was doing it, I looked out my rear view mirror at the women in the lane next to us because we were stopped. Thank God we were stopped in kind of traffic. So it kind of just went down. It didn't go out and sideways and back.
Yeah.
The sheer horror of these two women sitting in the car as Luca hurled all over the side. They were like, oh, I wish I had my camera. I wish I wasn't driving right now because it was just, the whole thing was absolutely amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, the low profile thing, throw that one out the window, man.
Yeah.
Your anonymity is gone.
Seriously.
So, all right, that went down. See, this is how we go down these rabbit holes. So Mike Graham, owner, founder, president, chief dishwasher at Second Melody, went down a few weeks ago, hung out at their joint in Chester. Super cool. Super awesome. There were astronauts and wall murals done by, our buddy Matty Ice. How'd you get started on this journey? What prompted you to, what'd you do before? My journey started in Manhattan at a big agency, obviously on a different side of the business, but
yeah.
How'd you do this?
Yeah. So it'll be 17 years for us this year. And looking back, to where it started, it was one of those scenarios. I think we probably talked about this before, where I never really set out to own a business. I didn't wake up one day and be like, oh, this would be cool. It was more kind of falling into it because I was getting bored, and at the ripe old age of 24, I thought I knew everything and nothing could go wrong, right? So I actually went to school, believe it or not, for film, and it was digital filmmaking, and I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write scripts, and I interned in the city. I was working on really cheesy talk shows, second-rate talk shows, not like your good ones either, like Ricky Lake or one of those back in the day. It was legit the Ricky Lake ripoffs, running around the city, grabbing stuff for all the associate producers and everything else. It was terrible. It was the days where they didn't pay you for the internship. You had to pay your own train fare, but that's what you did, right? So anyway, I got out of school doing video editing, had a couple small jobs here and there, and then hooked up with this company. Was actually owned by the brother-in-law of the girl I happened to be dating, right? Because as you do. And they were a small pharmaceutical marketing firm that handled these big like conferences and ad boards. So like when pharmaceutical companies want to talk about a disease state or anything like that, they invite all the doctors. A lot of that stuff you can't really do anymore because of HIPAA regulations. But anyway, this company put these big things on, and again, talk about dating myself. We created training CD-ROMs, so like actually programming the CD-ROM so that the pharmaceutical rep could like sit in their car before they walk into the doctor's office and like learn about the formularies and learn about the medication and everything else, and then walk in and talk to people that probably didn't want to talk to them anyway. But so yeah, so I was doing that for a while, editing videos for that, and then kind of picked up programming and was doing the whole thing, and then got to the point at the company where they were making some moves and changing, and it really wasn't in the cards for me. And I had a roommate in college who was working at Roche at the time in marketing, and hadn't seen him in a while, and he wanted to grab lunch and showed up to lunch with a business plan because that was his side of things. I'm like, yeah, well, I can design stuff, like I'm not the one writing the business plan. And basically, that's what it was. It was Second Melody in its infancy. It was this idea of combination of market research and design. And I mean, it sounds stupid, but it sounds stupid now, right? Because that's all we do is research and all we do is data. But like, 2005, no one was talking about data as it pertained to design and looking at research before you built a website and like stuff like that. So I mean, looking back on it now, at the time I took it for granted. My ex-partner was a really brilliant guy, and that was a cool idea, and people dug it. So we kind of just leveraged a lot of the contacts we had, again, which weren't that many, and just kind of were off to the races. So it had nothing to do with what I went to college with. I had a design gig on the side and kind of turned my freelance clients into a few of our first clients, and 17 years later, here we go.
The rest is history. I love it. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. Like I graduated with a history degree.
Yeah, right.
And people were like, how'd you get into marketing? I'm like, dude, you didn't live in the early 2000s. Like
Yeah.
it was
Right.
not well, it was, I feel like
It was a free-for-all.
yeah, like it was the wild
Yeah.
west. Like you could get in, and my path obviously was a little bit more data driven, I guess, because I was on the media buying side. So
Yeah.
by nature, it was just numbers and like formulas and media math and all that crap. But when you look at it and see what, and the really cool thing to the the 3.5 people in our listening audience, the really cool thing about the paths that Mike and I they're different, but they're parallel in that Mike's been going at this for 17 years. We're, in our 15th now. And how we started and how it sort of like has transformed. It was the wild west. That was the best way I could explain it. Like the things we did and how you did it. Like when Mike just said, like, it wasn't about data, like nobody was thinking about that. Like you just built a website based on like vanity and like, this is what I want. Like now the whole thing has gone 180 degrees. And having that understanding though, like even in the media buying world, it was the same thing. You were sitting there and it was like, all right, what are our demographics? But at the end of the day, it wasn't about the demographic. It was about like what Toyota wanted to sell. Like that was my client. Like what Lexus, like it was all about me, and like how that was going to transform into the ideas. And some of the biggest and most brilliant minds. My first presentation I ever did was in front of Jim Farley, who's the CEO of Ford now. Like craziness. Like you sit and think about it. He was the brand manager on Scion at the time. Like he was the guy who basically was crafted to build Scion into a brand. And those days, I think, are long gone, but the journey to where we are and the path to where we're going, I think, is kind of like the evolution of Mike Graham and the evolution. One of the things that I really took out of our conversation was that evolutionary process, because as we spoke, obviously 2 different organizations, but a lot of the things I mean, we're not vastly dissimilar, but
Right.
like you're going through some of the same things, pains and and things like that. And on the other side of it, it's unique to every organization. And I think that's important. I think a big takeaway for me was like stop talking and listen, because if
Yeah.
you do listen, even though you have your own struggles, that listening is valuable. Like I took a great deal away from a hour and a half conversation that we had. And that was pretty cool. With with the with that evolution of Second Melody, like what do you love about it? So one of the big things I talk about here is, for me, you know, I love the relationship part of it. And, we can joke about like, oh, more networking and things like that.
Yeah.
But literally that is what I think in my mind is my purpose, is like
Yep.
being that nexus of like connection points. So what do you love about what you do? What do you hate about what you do? Because I think there's a lot of people out here that would love to be Mike Graham.
Yeah.
In there, you laugh, but there's a ton of people that come up to me and they're like, I want to do what you do. And I'm like, it's really hard. It's
Yeah.
not easy to do that. It's not easy to stay in business for 17 years, given what, from 2003 or whatever, from what we've gone through. But like, what is it for you that you love about it? And what
Yeah.
do you wish you could change?
I think the one constant for me over the 17 years is the creative process. I think starting out as a designer, but having been a writer also, I kind of just had to. And again, I'm sure you did the same thing. Like you didn't have a choice. You took it all on and you did it all and you got your hands dirty and you worked through that and you developed your own process. And what's crazy to me is that, and it wasn't too long ago at this point, but I mean, I'd probably say maybe, I don't know, 5 to 7 years ago is when I finally said, actually probably longer than that, let's say probably 10 years, is when I probably said, you know what, there are way better people, way better designers that are working for me now than I will ever be. Like I was a good artist growing up. I was an okay designer. I'm a really good writer. And then it just, you just combine all those and you become that kind of like, you know, uh, it's like the master of none type of deal, right? And then you get to the point where you're bringing on this talent that you can work with, and you see what it needs to look like in order to be successful. And that's what I love, and being able to work with those people, because I'm still to this day, when I made that transition, I said, hey, listen, you know what? I'm not designing anymore. This doesn't make any sense. And I started to switch over to more of the brand strategy stuff, which I still engage in to this day with the clients. Like, I mean, the talent that I have working for me now, I mean, they're just absolutely incredible. And
Yeah.
half the time they probably are like, okay, Mike's joining the meeting, whatever, but like they also, and I try to tell them as much as possible, but like I probably get way more out of it than they do because being able to work with talented people and then produce a product that then you show to somebody and you see the smile on their face, like the opposite of what you do. Again, you and I talked about this, is that like we're the feel good stuff. We're a branding agency. So like we get to take someone's story and spit it back to them and show them something they've never seen before. And half the time, despite our previous conversation about the mix of data and all that, like data doesn't even enter the picture, because we're saying like, you told us this and check this out. And then they look at it and they're like, oh, you hear us, and like we got to the point a few years ago where that was our goal. Like we want the client to come back to us and say, you hear us, you see us. And that became a thing, and it almost became a game. Like we're like, okay, we need to get them to say it. Like, what are we going to do to step it up to get them to say it? So anyway, I went off on a tangent, but I think the thing I love about it most is still the creative process. It's the solving problems. Throw anything you got at me. What's the deal? I'm going to come back to you with a solution. And even if we don't hit it on the first try, by the end of this, you're going to say, you heard us. This is perfect. This represents us. This is who we are. We're putting out in the world. The second part of your question, what do I hate? Listen, I don't, anybody who owns their own business probably has a laundry list of things that keeps them up at night. I don't think I've slept well in 17 years, but like, I don't think there's anything I hate about it. I think the frustrating thing for me is a little bit, and this is personal, it has nothing to do with anybody else, is that we were just talking about getting started and that Wild West feeling, right? And like you did it because you had to, and you figured out a solution, and there was nothing at stake. There was a little bit at stake, but there was not as much at stake as there is now, right? And I think I fought so hard, completely, like, unadvisable, by the way. Don't do this at home, kids. But like, I fought so hard against processes for my business, not because I was like, oh, we don't need processes. It was just because for so long we operated on that mentality of like, oh, we don't know how to do this. Everybody's jumping in and figuring this out. Like, I didn't hire a single person that didn't have like 25 different talents that they could jump in and video edit and whatever. And then we got to the point where that doesn't work anymore. That's not scalable, because you need to hire the people that are great at the thing they do and whatever it was. So I think that's the thing I hate the most now is that I think I feel like sometimes I've lost that, like, let's put it all on the line and go after it, because we have the processes. And then I find myself falling into like, oh, this is the process. So again, it's not so much what I hate about running a business. It's kind of what I hate, that I get comfortable sometimes, and I need to knock myself out of it.
Two things that are really important that came out of that I admire immensely. The first is that when you said, we hear you and we see you, that's the reason why Second Melody and you as a leader are so good at what you do, because so many agencies, so many people miss the mark on that. That it's, we live in a world in the creative and the marketing, like, it's a me. Like, we think we have all the answers and all the ideas. And a lot of it is like, honestly, it's like empathetic listening. Like,
oh, absolutely.
It's like being a psychologist almost.
Or I mean, listen, in the end of the day too, like, we kind of make a joke out of it, but like, we don't create anything as a branding agency. And what I mean by that is that, like, we're not Picasso, right? Like, we don't go into a room, paint something from our mind and go like, here you go, and somebody buys it. Like, we are yanking this out of people, like, we are going in and we are finding the deepest, darkest, coolest stuff that nobody knows about, and we're spinning this into a narrative. But like, we didn't create that, we grabbed it from somewhere. And yes, we are very creative, we are amazing designers and everything like that, but like, any branding agency that tells you that they're like designing it and creating it, like, you are only as good as the stories that you're being told from your clients and your partners, right? So like, you have to remember that it's about the user, it's about the person, your client, it's about their clients, their users, or whatever it is. And the best you could do is just represent them. And our thing is like accurate and ownable, right? Every single thing about what we create for them has to be accurate to the stories we heard, and it has to be ownable by our client. It has to be something that no one else can claim and no one else can show out there and match. So that's it. Like, that's all we are.
But when you say that's it, like, that's literally all it should be. That's literally all it should be. And the second part of it is knowing that process. When we first started talk about going back to, like, every time we speak, it hammers home. Like, that's what I love about talking with you, because you get away from the realization, the understanding. All right, how do I say this? The understanding of giving up things that you think you're good at to other people over the course of time. That's how you become a really good business owner. And it's the transition from being really good at what you're trained to do and really good at what you're being called to do, which that's the transitionary part. Because at the beginning, dissimilar to, like, it wasn't the creative, I was never creative, but like, I used to spend hours doing billing, and then realized Charlene was, our CFO, was way smarter than I was and way better at it. And she's literally transformed the business over the last 7 years. Or Zinka with operations, or Meredith with accounts, or Dan with digital strategies. Like, you're called to be the you're called to be the Mookie Blaylock. And right, like, you're called to be that really amazing point guard that basically has to make everybody else, to run the team, to make everybody else as good as they possibly can, put them in the right positions to succeed, put the ball in their hands. Like if you're a dunker, like make sure you get it down on the block to dunk. If you're a 3-point shooter, you got to drive the lane and make sure that that person gets the ball, you know, catch and shoot on the 3-point line to be successful. Like that is the transition, or the transitionary point with being a good execution, like what you were trained on. That was my biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
It was, I was a media buyer. And when we first started this, I was like, I got to do so many media buys. That's what I was called to do. And this is what I have to do. And then all of a sudden it got to the point where it was like, all right, with like my ex-partner, like, no, we need a really good designer. And then, oh my gosh, we need, like, I'm not the account person, and we need a really good account person. And then, oh my gosh, we need a really good digital person, and all these things, like all the things.
Yeah, sure.
And that's where I think entrepreneurs either get stuck, they can't actually get over that hurdle, or it's really hard for them from a vanity standpoint. Like letting go of that is basically unlocking the key to being successful.
Yeah.
Because as you build and you put the people around you, to your point, when you put a really good designer around you that you can see, and from your standpoint, it's probably a little bit easier because with my stuff, it's more like operational. With your stuff, it's like you were trained to design, and then you see somebody who's better and you're like, holy crap, this person's really good, like at what they do. And then it's easier to step back. So yeah, like crazy transition to becoming a business owner in the 17 years. What's your most favorite achievement?
Oh, wow. Most favorite achievement.
What was the biggest, like, one thing that you remember year after year that you're like going back to those like wild days when you first began? Like, what was that aha moment? Like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like I'm still a sucker for the win, you know what I mean? For the pitch, for the chase. Like I love client, you know, like pursuing clients, you know, still to this day. I go over and above, you know. I mean, just as recently as this year already, like we've landed 2 really important and exciting accounts, you know, things that if you had told me that we would have landed even 2 years ago, I would have been like, nah, you know, like not because we're not qualified, but just because certain things, no matter how big you get, like your expectations just get bigger, right? You know, so like we go back to like probably the first account we ever landed. I was like, oh, the hell are we going to do this, you know? And then even 17 years later, there are those accounts that you're like, okay, you know, those are pie in the sky, whatever. So I think for me, like it's that year over year, the excitement of landing that, you know what I mean? Like it's that excitement of getting our team together and saying, what do we want to work on? And then throwing stuff out and be like, okay, cool, you know, let's go. Let's try to get it. I think the other thing too, which, you know, I just recently, you know, made an attempt to quantify, is the amount of work that we've done pro bono for charities and nonprofits over the years. And, you know, that is just born out of, you know, obviously wanting to give back as much as we possibly can. But like we do so much of it now, and I take it for granted. And I think my team just puts their all into everything, no matter how much money we're making on any project, that like we just go and we go and go, we're throwing stuff out there. And then to sit back and be like, okay, cool, like we did it, you know what I mean? Like we set out whatever it was 5-7 years ago and said, hey, listen, we're going to take on at least one pro bono serious project per year. And now I think we're up to at least 2, and then like a few more things that, you know, it's mattered in there. So I think, you know, just going back to your question before, it's like from a business standpoint, the wins for me on the client side are still it, you know, that's what keeps me happy. And then on the more human side, I think it's the ability to provide services to organizations that may not be able to afford the quality they deserve because they have the messages that really need to be heard. So we're happy that, you know, we can provide that at any, you know, any rate.
The last two people. So episode 22 was my buddy Jason Ellinger, and it's going to be coming out before yours. It's actually going to be a really cool. I didn't even put these two together, but to your point about the pro bono work, their company called Beard and Bowler, they coin themselves the hero collectors. So that's kind of like what they're doing. They're doing their model is to get nonprofits out there in a way that they feel like can't be told otherwise, or they don't have a sponsor or whatever. That point that you just made, I think, is really unique, and I don't want it to get lost here, is that in this community, like, we're both here in New Jersey doing it, and obviously we're right on Manhattan's doorstep. And again, over the last 2.5 years, I think there's some shift in kind of like the agency in Manhattan, because everybody's kind of working from wherever they are now. But it's one of the things I want to get your take on it, because I always use this as kind of like a chip on my shoulder with regards to how we operated.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of quality in New Jersey that just doesn't get the accolades that it should. And maybe accolades is not the right word. Like, there's a lot of good agencies and a lot of good marketers here in New Jersey that don't get the attention I think they deserve. And giving back to that community, I think you guys do a really good job of it too, to the point of what you were saying, that, and we try to do it as well. Like, we have our event next week for Eva's Village, and nonprofit board for Backpacks for Life. But that giving back component, I think the community here in New Jersey does such a good job of that. And I think that is so vital that it's not lost on us, like, that we're here in a community, and that we're, we may be competition, or we may be competing against each other, and that's awesome and that's good. But on the other side of it, there's this community of like doers that are really into the state, the people in the state, the nonprofits in the state. And I think it's something that separates who we are as a group, I guess, or as a state of individuals, bringing a like a marketing contingency together. I think it's phenomenal. It's something that for me personally, it's always been important. I see for you, it's been important. I'm sure we're gonna have many more conversations over this over the course of time, but kudos, and it's awesome.
You mentioned the chip on the shoulder thing about the bigger agencies, or the Manhattan agencies. It's funny you mentioned that, because I think there's still some of that for me, but I honestly I gave that up a few years ago, and the reason I did was because I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice to comparing ourselves to really anybody. But listen, I mean, if you're saying Manhattan agency of the same size, maybe that's a different story. And I could see, we've always faced that too, where it's like, okay, well, we're using somebody from New York, whatever, but then I started to just focus my attention on the larger agencies. Like, I don't care where you're located, we're up there competing against people that are, 3-4 times our size and whatever it was. But for me, I kind of just started to go down a path where I was like, I realized that there is a time and a place for every type of agency. And I think it's more important that you capture that when your time comes, versus constantly going head to head with somebody in a way that doesn't exist, right? Because, like, have we lost projects to agencies, 3 or 4 times our size? Absolutely. Were we qualified to do those projects? I don't know. Maybe we could have figured it out. Maybe that's not why we lost the project, but I think, again, where I'm going with this is that I have been able to hone our craft in a way I feel that targets specific types of businesses in companies of any size, right? So, like, the perfect example is, like, we are fortunate enough to be able to work with Nike this year. It's a dream account. I can't believe we landed it, but we're not putting commercials out for shoes. You know what I mean? Like, we're not competing against Wieden & Kennedy. Like, we're doing specific initiatives for smaller departments, social impact department, and like things like that are like amazing jobs. And like, I don't want to be competing against the larger agencies. I want to be able to get my foot in the door somewhere like that, reap the benefits of not only the giving my team something that every single person has want to work on in their life, but then also just the satisfaction to know that, listen, it doesn't matter what size agency I am, there's a place for all of us in those big settings. So anyway, kind of went off on a tangent there, but I like, just to your point before, like that, I kind of gave it up, and I'm like, kind of like, I don't compete against anybody. You know what I mean? Like, it's been very rare when I've even known, all these New Jersey agencies. I think I've ever known that we've competed against one other person in the state or in the area. For me, it's just all about Second Melody, putting ourselves out there, doing what we need to do, and seeing where the chips fall.
It's I can't say that I've followed the same path exactly, because as as an ex athlete, and I say way ex athlete because it's just in my nature to compete. But
Yeah.
as you get to a place, as you begin to mature in your career, like Darren, DSM at 3 years was all about like, let's go, let's go, let's go. Like I had that
Yep.
big agency mentality where it was like we were competing against everybody else.
Yeah.
And then probably when we started the digital side of the agency, it was like, no, let's just do what we do. Like this is about, it was a total mind shift from like we're competing to like we're in a community.
Yeah.
And however we can help in that community. And there were good things to it. It was definitely hard at times because it's when you're wired a certain way, it's not easy to not be wired that way.
Yeah.
Over the long haul, though, I think to your point, I think that it's phenomenal that you can think that way and you could be that way. And it's similar to, like with DSM, like we are who we are. That's who we want to be. We have certain things that we do really well. We have other things that we don't. We find partners for that, and we go about our business. And we do the best work that we can in terms of telling our stories and doing the things that we're meant to do. Each client is different. Each client has their own personality, and that's the beauty of doing it. I think that's a big part of the beauty of doing it. No 2 days are the same. That's awesome sometimes, and that really sucks sometimes. But it's figuring out. It's like a big Tetris game. It's the only way that I can explain it. As we kind of like to be mindful of time as we wind this down, like what's coming up for Second Melody? Like when I tell you guys, if you're ever in Chester, find the shop and like go, well, maybe don't go see but like, it's just, you walk in there and I was transported to, I told you when I saw you, it was like being transported to like when DSM was like 2 or 3 years old. And it was like that mentality, like you're just brought into a place that's so freaking cool. And that's part of what you said, like you kind of get lost on it because there's that now process, or there's the this is the way we have to do it because we've evolved and matured.
Yeah.
There's also a part of, I think, why I enjoy talking with you is like, there's also a part of like, there's some days where I wish I could go back to like 3 people and like Animal House. Like, because it was so hard, but it was so much fun. Those wins, those epic highs, and like the things you thought were like the lowest of lows. Now you're like, dude, it's Tuesday, like whatever.
Yeah. Right.
There's that like missing piece sometimes. So where do you see it going, and how do you keep going at what you're doing and making it even better?
Yeah. I think for me now, the goal is the same exact projects we have, the same type of clients, because I think it's for the first time, in a long time, we can confidently say as an agency that not only do we love the people we get to do work for, like this isn't the old days. That's going back to the love-hate thing that you mentioned before. Like, there was a point in the agency where it was like, 75% of the people that called, we were taking on these big jobs probably shouldn't have, and we thought we were doing awesome, but like meanwhile everybody at the agency hated working on a specific account, and that happened to be our biggest account. So I think it's keeping up with that, and honestly it's finding more work-life balance for myself, for my team, but doing the best work we possibly can because of that. You know what I mean? Like, work-life balance, not in a sense like, yeah, absolutely, I want everybody to be able to take a breather, but what I want is people to be able to focus on their craft, focus on what they love. I want to allow them the time to do that, and that could be a struggle sometimes. Like the biggest challenge is that, like, you don't get me wrong, we turn down jobs. We turn down a good amount of them because we're on a kick now where it's like, if this doesn't fit us as an agency and this isn't going to be good for us, we don't want to have anything to do with it, right? And listen, every once in a while I don't follow my gut and I screw it up and I hear it from my team, but like, for the most part, like, we're really defining what we want to work on. The problem is that, like, sometimes client needs to go and you have to either decide you want to go or not. And, you're piling stuff on and on and on. And they may be the greatest projects in the world for the greatest brands in the world, but it doesn't change the fact that when people start being overworked, that nobody's happy, right? Including myself. So I think for me, it's about figuring out that balance of what it looks like to take on bigger projects, as an agency, to charge more money, to make sure that we're providing a product that warrants that amount of money, to give my team a little breathing room. So maybe we can take on less projects throughout the year and everybody can, focus a little bit more on that. So I think really for me, it's about processes, as boring as that sounds, I'm on this kick now that, as much as I hate it and I fought it, we talked about it at the beginning of this thing, that, like, I saw how much it's changed over the past 2 or 3 years. We had to regress in order to move forward, for sure. We were going a mile a minute, and yeah, was the agency growing every year? Absolutely. Were we bringing on new exciting clients? Absolutely. But that thing was bursting at the seams. And I'm not just talking to, like, our space or, like, the amount of people. I'm talking about the fact that, like, things were hanging on by a thread because there was no room and there was no clear path forward to grow, um, and still maintain our quality. You know what I mean? Yep. It was just like work, work, work. Maybe the quality falls off. Just keep working, and it's just a pile, like a mound of laundry that eventually it's going to fall over. So anyway, the product of that, the hard work over the past few years with me and my team was like, we needed to take a step back and reinvent the way we're doing business. The work product never changed. In fact, it's gotten better. But what I'm saying is, like, we didn't change the way we were putting stuff out. It was all internal. So I'm on that kick now. It's like, how can I make this thing run better so that everybody can continue to do what they love and I can continue to do what I love, and there won't be a problem when things either grow or shrink a tiny bit here and there. This isn't the end of the world. It's more about, like, oh yeah, we have a plan for that. We can keep pushing a little bit more.
That balance, it's not even the work-life balance. Like, I think both organizations, from what I can tell, do a pretty good job of that. It's the balance of trying to figure out how to, as you grow, I think the good organizations during this time, because you've probably seen it too. There's a lot of organizations that you've seen. I've had a lot of conversations of older folks in the industry wanting to get out. Like, people, like, this was a time for people to get out. If there was ever a time over the last 2.5 years where the people who had, like, had it, like, were done, it's about trying to understand what you're doing, understand how you're doing it, to try to do it better, to balance out the organization. Because for me too, it's like, let's go, 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 go. Like, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. Like, like, you always get worried because you know how fleeting, a good account could be, or like, do we take this on, or do we know? You never know. Like, in our business, you never know until you actually get into it. So that whole pitch process, or that whole process of bringing them on, could be one thing, and then it could turn into another, when you actually start working with them. That balance part of it, kudos to you, man, because that's what we're trying to figure out too. And it's a daily struggle, because there's been this influx. Again, I think I told you about, like, I think everybody forgot there was going to be a 2022. Like, everybody was so wrapped up in 2020 and 2021. They were like, oh my gosh, we have a marketing budget. And then all of a sudden, in, like, first quarter, everybody was like, oh my God, we actually have to market again. And like,
yeah,
you guys should have thought about this like 6 months ago. Like,
yeah, right.
We can help you, but, like, we can't take everybody on at once. So anyway, this has been awesome. This is an homage to you, man. Keep doing what you're doing. I look forward to so many more, sit downs and talks and, libations, and just, like, what you have and the way you're doing it the right way. And
I appreciate that.
I want to pay homage to that, because I think it's really important. A lot of times, it doesn't get noticed. And when I see someone, again, I don't have everything figured out, but when I see someone that I feel like is doing things the right way, it's a tribute to you. Keep doing it, because what you're doing and how you're doing it and the why behind what you're doing it, I think is impeccable.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate
kudos
that.
to you, man.
I appreciate that. And listen, hey, we've only known each other for a short amount of time, but I can count on you for an honest opinion. And listen, the thanks is like, I'm thankful for it. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you. There's lots of homages going around here. This is awesome.
Yeah. I'd like to switch it to homage for this episode. Is that cool?
You can, here you go. Here's your Sean Evans moment. Camera one, camera two, the hot ones thing. The floor is yours. You can now take homage and turn it into homage or oh shit or whatever you want to make it. The floor is yours, man. The minute, take it on, and that's how we'll roll it out today.
It's good. So I think the theme is amazing. I think for this episode we're gonna call it an homage, because we're gonna get fancy, because it's Tuesday morning and there's no better time to get fancy than on Tuesday morning. So nice. That's it. Thanks, Darren.
You heard it right here. There's no better time to get fancy than on Tuesday morning. And with that, episode 23 is in the can. Mike, thank you, my man. Stay out of trouble. Safety third. We will get together soon, and here for you always. Keep rocking it. Second Melody. Keep rocking it. We love you, and rolling out, guys. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Talk soon.